the players in it, and sort of the processes necessary within public safety to market and build a business. At the same time, I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember now, building up businesses from just initial idea all the way to sale and through the entire growth phase. So I want to share with you a couple thoughts about building a business that has to do with training, or an instructor business, because it has some of its own variables that I think oftentimes are not thought about. So obviously all of you are subject matter experts. You provide training into the fire space, into the public safety world, and as a trainer out there, you basically have a moment where you have to think about your destiny. How do you want to proceed forward? And you really have a few paths that you can choose, 3 doors or 3 pathways that you might want to walk through. The value of what you're bringing to the constituents in public safety or to the firefighters out there is the knowledge, is the things that you know, that you have in your head, or your experience, or I like to call it wisdom. And we're very, the industry is very appreciative of what you're bringing to them, but you have 3 paths that you can consider. The first one is training, providing training one-on-one. So yourself going out, gathering other firefighters, marketing that you're giving a class or a course, getting them in there, and sharing that wisdom with them one-on-one. And obviously that's very, very hard to do if you think about how many firefighters are out there. So if you have a particular subject matter expertise and you're wanting to get that out to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, it's impossible for you as a business, as an instructor business, to really scale if you are the bottleneck, if you're the one doing that. The second part of it is the possibility is what we call let it go, which essentially is you take your knowledge, your wisdom, and you have a third party package it for you, and then they put it in their platform and sell it as part of their business model. And you might get some money for that, but it's not a long-term viable business strategy for you. And the third path that you can go down is the let it grow path. So the first thing I want to impress on all of you is that the value that you're bringing to the public safety market is what is in your head. It's your expertise, it's your wisdom, it's your experience. So when you think about that, you need to think about that on the one hand, if you're doing one-on-one training, you are controlling that intellectual property. So if you take only one thing from this particular webinar today, it is that you need to protect your intellectual property. And that's the beginning of your business. You need to understand that that is the value that you're bringing, and protecting it is paramount. So if you're doing one-on-one training, essentially look at this chart. On the one axis you have the value, and on the other axis you have how far your reach is. And if you choose the one-on-one path, where you are marketing your individual courses and you are leading the instruction of your individual courses, you can extract the maximum value from your intellectual property, but you're not going to get much reach. So you can see the value bar is high, but you're not far over on the reach axis. If you choose path number 2, which is let it go, that is where you would basically sell your intellectual property to someone else who does the marketing and distribution of that for a living. You will probably get reach, quite a bit of reach, but you're not going to extract the maximum value. Typically what happens is these providers come in and they ask you to sit and videotape yourself. You sign over your rights for that lesson or that piece of that bit of content, and then they put it into a subscription and sell it. And there's all sorts of providers out there that are doing this. Target Solutions might be one. You might find them in Fire and Rescue One, for example. They'll just videotape you. They'll pay you some amount of money, and then they will put it on their platform and sell it. And perhaps you've negotiated a small royalty for that, but the bulk of the revenue goes to the provider. So those are the two main paths that people, typically have taken. There's a third path. And the third path is to figure out a way as your business to build your instructor business in a way that allows you to package your content and allow it to grow on its own. So put it through a sales, marketing, and distribution process that allows you to scale that and to distribute it far and wide across the United States with minimal stress to yourself. And that becomes a business model that allows you to build once, sell many times. So you're not selling brains by the pound or instructional expertise by the pound. You are packaging instructional expertise and able to sell it, build it once, package it once, sell it many, many times across the United States. So that's something for you to think about. This is a choice that you are going to have to make as an instructor. So today we're going to cover essentially 5 things. First, what to market. So what kinds of courses, how do you decide what is actually going to be worth your time to build, put the energy in, package up, and get out there? So what criteria are you going to use? We're going to talk about how to communicate, how to actually package it up in a way that creates high impact. Third, we're going to talk about distribution. How do you take your knowledge, your content, your training, and get the maximum distribution out there? How to promote it so that people know that it's there and are excited about taking your courses. And 5, a very important topic is how do you stand out? How do you become the best of the best in that particular training course that you're trying to get out into the world? Let's start with number 1, what to market. Very simply put, and I'm not going to dwell too long on this, you need to understand the nexus between 3 things. Your knowledge, so the things that you are capable of packaging up in terms of training, the need, the market needs. So it's not necessarily a great idea to package up something where the market doesn't need it, right? No matter how much you know about it or how passionate you are about it, if there isn't a known need in the market for that kind of training, then you might be spending a lot of energy, time, and money putting something together that no one's going to buy. And the third component of this equation for you is the availability. So if you have something that you know very well and there is a stated need, but there are 100 other competitors out there that are selling the exact same course, that's probably not one that you want to focus a lot of effort and time on unless you have something very unique that gives you a better mousetrap, a better training event than everybody else who's out there. So look for that confluence where you have the knowledge, there's a need out there, and there isn't a tremendous amount of competition. That's where you're going to get the maximum uptake on the course products or the course offerings that you're putting out there. So we encourage you to think about this when you look at all the possible topics that you could be providing training in, and think through whether there is, you have the knowledge, whether there's a need out there, and there isn't a massive availability of courses already out there in the marketplace for that. Kim, let's talk about how to communicate.
Sure. I think the main reason that we're going to focus on how to communicate is not necessarily because you're not good at talking about the things that you know. We think that there's just probably some honing to be done for all of us, including Ari and myself. The reason that we talk so much about how to communicate is that one of the #1 things that's going to help you build your business is word of mouth. So understanding how to effectively communicate your educational materials will be the thing that brings people back to your courses again and again, and it's the thing that allows them to advocate for you to their peers as an instructor. So we're going to walk through a few basic principles for how to communicate best with people so that you can generate as much word of mouth as possible. The first is I want to talk about focus time. The reality for many humans, and I'd say almost all, is that most people's concentration lasts for a maximum of about 10 to 15 minutes. We're asking a lot of you today because we're going to keep you on this call for upwards of 45 minutes to an hour. But the reality is, if you are in a situation where you can break your training up, whether that's by incorporating activities and movements or actually offering the education in different modules, separate modules that people can take sequentially but not necessarily immediately, this can allow for an increase in focus on the materials that you're teaching. So offering 4 15-minute modules in an online format is often more effective than offering a 1-hour single module. The other principle that we like to think about is retention. The thing that helps people remember your content the most is immediacy, meaning that they can immediately apply what you're teaching them to a situation that is currently impacting them. So reaching people at the right time when they need that training the most is critical. It's also difficult to do. It requires you to understand what's going on in your field and what's going on in the environment and how people might be impacted. But allowing them to take that training when they can immediately apply to something that is meaningful to them, that makes the most sense and is the most likely to help them retain that information. The second idea here under retention is that important information generally needs to be heard upwards of 7 times before someone can retain it. And it just sounds a little bit ridiculous to think about saying the same thing 7 times over in a given presentation. But that's one way to think about breaking your training up into multiple modules. It gives you the ability to repeat important information multiple times without sounding like a broken record within 1 hour, one single 1-hour module. It's also important to think about different ways to say the same idea so that you're getting the same principle across, but you're not sounding like you've just repeated the same words over and over. Another really important thing about how to communicate with people is to make sure that you're choosing the right type of course for the content that you want to get across to them. So I think many of you are probably very familiar with instructor-led courses, and these manifest in multiple ways, whether it's at a conference and you're teaching in a classroom environment, or you're teaching people out in the field and you're going into live fires together or simulators or whatever the situation might be. This is when you have one or more instructors individually interacting one-on-one or one-to-many with a group of people. Another type of course is online, and certain types of topics and content just are delivered effectively via online training. Other types, not so much. So it's really important to evaluate, not everything should be taught online and not everything needs to be taught with a live instructor. So it's very important to think about, is this something that I could be teaching online? That will help me reach a lot more people without having to travel across the country and show up in all these different departments. But if it's not appropriate content for online presentation, that's okay too. That's an instructor-led class. You can also consider blended learning, and this can take multiple forms. So it could be an online component of a course that you teach prior to an instructor-led course. So you're giving kind of the principles and background information prior to showing up on site. This can also be an instructor-led lecture with some field practice. So there's a lot of different ways to think about blended learning, and it's really effective for a lot of different types of topics, because usually there's some sort of foundational knowledge, even if it's an instructor-led or physical skills type training. There's some foundational knowledge as to why that is important training and how it can be applied in the field that can be taught maybe in advance, so that when you get out into the field together, you're doing something really proactive and actionable, but you're not spending a whole lot of time just on principles. I think we've all heard the idea of kind of a death by PowerPoint kind of presentation. And while I know that PowerPoint sometimes gets a bad rap, it is a really effective presentation tool. But if it's not done appropriately, it can absolutely mislead people and create a lot of confusion for your presentation, in which case you'll not be earning that word of mouth that you're seeking. So some really important tools and skills to keep people from getting lost in your PowerPoint presentation. Always make sure that you're telling your audience where they are in the presentation. In this particular presentation, we've done that by using a title for each slide that's descriptive of the content on the slide. And we've also put the kind of a marker on the bottom of the slide to give you an idea of which section you're in, so that you know how far into the presentation we are, how much is left, and what topic we're really trying to drive home. As much as possible, use visuals to tell the story. For a lot of training opportunities, this is photographs and things like that. It's not necessarily graphic design skills that you need to have. There are plenty of opportunities to tell a story with visuals that don't require a whole lot of visual design skills. Photographs are incredibly effective. Use cohesive design, cohesive colors, keep everything consistent, and only draw one conclusion per slide, so that people know what they're meant to take away from that slide. So let's look at an example of kind of what not to do. Here's a slide. It's the exact same slide that I was telling you, just isn't showing you right now. And the best training will be aligned with a need is a much longer title, and people can get lost in that title. There's a lot of hard to read text, and there's not a lot of opportunity to draw a conclusion from the text. You can hardly read it. On this slide, you don't know where to look first. What's the hierarchy of information? What's the most important thing on the slide? I have no idea. Probably the thing in the star, although the item in the blue might be pretty important as well, but that's the smallest text. It's very confusing. And there are lots of different styles on this slide. All the text fonts are different, capping is different. It's just impossible to know what you're supposed to take away from this slide. So keep that in mind as you're creating your slides. I think it's one way to really keep people engaged and to not risk that kind of death by PowerPoint confusion that can come up. Another really important thing when you're developing your content is to choose the right medium. I think sometimes we get into a situation where we really want video to work for us. It's cool, it's newer, it's more engaging. We really want an infographic to work for us because it's cool and people engage with those generally. But some topics just aren't well suited to those media, and that's okay. Not everything has to be taught in the most exciting new way. There are certain things that are really appropriate to teach with audio or with text, something that you might read that's relatively short and can get a quick message across. So really think through what's the right medium. If you want to do a physical demonstration of a skill, video is going to be way better for you than trying to describe that via text or audio. Your next option is probably graphic. So really think about what you're trying to get across and what your objective is. If you haven't clearly defined that objective, it's nearly impossible to choose the right medium by default. The next thing in terms of communication that I want to talk about is we talked about that idea of sharing important information 7 times. It sounds a little bit crazy if you try to do it in one content module, whether that's an in-person course or an online course. So we really like to apply this idea of a continuum of learning. And this is great for building your business too, because you get some benefits out of this as a business developer. So if you think about building a pre-course video, this might be a 5-minute video teaser that gets people engaged with the content that you're going to deliver and why your topic of choice is important. This gives your audience an overview of the topic, and it gives you some brand recognition. So if you think of yourself as a business or a brand, now people have seen your face and they know your name, and that is a great start for any business, and it's one of the hardest things to do when you're new into the field. The next thing that you might deliver is your intro course. So if you think about this as an instructor, this might be a course that you're teaching at a conference or delivering online. And this gives your students some knowledge of the content that you're an expert in, and it allows you to spread knowledge and, if in an appropriate situation, increase revenue for yourself. So you may show up at a fire department to teach this course or deliver it online. Either way, this is a revenue generating opportunity for you. Once you've delivered that main content, don't let your students stop thinking about that important topic that you delivered to them. Maybe deliver another piece right after that. In this case, we've built in a graphic. So we thought maybe a step-by-step list of the ways to accomplish the thing that you taught in your course. Anything that allows them to revisit the topic that you've discussed with them, it gives them a reminder of the knowledge that you passed on to them in that main course. It also builds your brand recognition further, so you're getting in front of them one more time. And by the time that you've given them additional information on a topic for the third time, you're being positioned as a thought leader. Now you're someone that they look up to, and you are influencing them to think about the topic in a different and new way. And that makes you a thought leader to them. At that point, they know much more about you as a brand, and they're more likely to continue to engage with you if they've continued up to this point. There are a lot of different opportunities to continue this learning. In this case, it's an example. We've chosen to put in some video shorts. So these might be a 2-minute training video or a 15-minute training video. But again, you're reminding them of the knowledge that they've received. You may be adding a little additional knowledge to them, and you could charge for these. So this is another opportunity for you to increase your revenue as an instructor. And finally, an advanced course. If they've stuck with you this long, let's let them become experts as well. Let's deliver some additional content and maybe take a deeper dive into the topics that you've been addressing with them and spread some additional knowledge. Again, this is a revenue generating opportunity for you. So not every piece of information or every delivery of content within your continuum has to generate revenue. You could choose to do this for absolutely no revenue. You could choose to charge for every item in here. It's completely up to you and your business model, but the idea is to stay in front of the people that you have already engaged and position yourself as someone that they trust, because you do have the knowledge, you are trustworthy, and they absolutely do need to understand the types of things that you're teaching. So this will help all of that information stick for them. And I am going to turn it back over to Ari.
Thank you, Kim. All incredibly important knowledge to have, because as you start to think of yourself as a business, you are both a brand and a product at the same time. So understanding how to package that up, and then the topic I'm going to cover now is how to distribute that out into the world. Let's talk about what's happened since the revolution of the internet and how business models have changed, and then how you fit in as a training business within the new paradigms that are out there for distribution. The music industry was widely disrupted by Apple some years ago as it released iTunes. So if you remember, we used to buy CDs, and CDs had tracks on them, and people were required to spend, let's say, $18, $16 for a CD filled with music. And it was all monopolized by the music industry, and they were the ones who reaped the majority of the profits, and some royalties going back to the artists. And so what Apple actually did was completely disrupt that industry through technology. The fact that now we could carry an MP3 player in our pocket, and the fact that now we could buy an individual song for 99 cents, that was a result of really listening to what the customer wanted. The customer did not want to spend $18 for a CD when they only really wanted a single song, a hit track from that CD. And that changed our entire notion of how music was distributed. The same thing happened in general merchandising, and we've seen that with Amazon as a very good example of that. The internet has made it possible now for us to have an aggregate marketplace of all the possible retail goods we could want, and for us to be able to compare and contrast the value of those items and then make much more informed choices. So this is another example of where the consumer, listening to what the consumer wanted of that product, changed and completely disrupted an industry, in this case retail. So we asked the question, what is going to happen with training? Training is an industry, just like any other industry, that is ripe for disruption through technology, and we're already seeing it happen, and Kim touched upon it. the fact that now I can take knowledge and I can package it up and I can distribute it widely across the world through techniques like e-learning or video-based learning is a game changer for two reasons. One, it allows the individual instructor who's, their knowledge and their brand is one that they're trying to amplify out there in the world. It allows them to do that at a relatively low cost and get very high return, which was not possible previously, similar to the way a music artist is now able to basically promote themselves online, whereas before, if you didn't have a massive label like a Sony behind you, then you were not going to be very effective at promoting yourself. Now we have these tools come out. So the future of the training world is a combination of using internet-based technologies to distribute and market that and package, and you're building the ability to on that framework, build your personal brand. And so we have good examples of this in other industries, not public safety, with Khan Academy, for example, which is a very, very good example of great training packaged up, and where the internet has created a disruptive paradigm in education in and of itself. Some other examples, we see YouTube, for example, being used for tutoring or training a lot. And so that allows us all sorts of new ideas in how we package knowledge and how we distribute it. Today, with the tools we have on the internet, everyone who spends a little bit of time and energy can become a publisher, right? Online. You can publish training, you can publish books, you can publish music, because the internet provides an inherent distribution channel for that. So as we think about the distribution models, there's really three that you need to think about. Do it yourself. So that's where you as an individual are aggregating or building all the tools that you need in order to distribute your training out there. So you might need some web design skills and database skills to be able to do this, and you could essentially create your own framework to do that. The second possibility is to ride existing frameworks that are out there, and this could also be when you're basically just packaging up or selling your content out there, or go for an online marketplace that already exists. So the Amazon, if you will, of training. So there are marketplaces like that out there. The First Forward marketplace, which has teamed up with ISFSI, is a very good example of it is actually the leading public safety training marketplace that's out there. So that's one that you can leverage all the tools that are available on there to manage a lot of the back end of your business, as well as the marketing and distribution channel for your training business. Kim, do you want to talk about promotion?
I would love to. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about promoting yourself as a business and as an instructor, and also promoting your courses. And kind of the first concept in doing this is creating a value proposition. And in order to do this, you have to ask yourself some very difficult questions. So this can be about you, it can be about your product, whichever you'd like to kind of go through first, but it is a very important thing to do, because this provides the basis for any and all promotion of yourself as a business and also your product or your courses. So I think a lot of these are relatively easy to start out with. Know your basics. What is it that you're selling? Who are you selling to? And then they get a little bit more difficult. You got to dig into who you are. What do you do well? And what's your customer-focused goal? What are you trying to help with? What's your audience's problem, and how does your training solve it? And not in a very broad, kind of esoteric way. Really ask yourself this question and make yourself write down the answer. The act of writing it down makes a big difference, because it's not as easy to say something like, Well, my audience's problem is that they're not well trained. Well, okay, but let's talk a little bit more granularly. How are you going to fix that? What's the actual training that they need? What are they lacking? Now it's time to think about differentiators. So really think through what makes you different. What do you bring to the table that no one else can bring to the table? That's the thing that if you start putting it in the descriptions for your course or the title for your course, if you start highlighting it in your training, and even when you meet new people, that's what's going to attract people to choose your training over someone else's. You're different. You offer them something they can't get anywhere else. And then your promise. What is it that you're delivering to your audience? What do you promise? Are they going to be better at skills related to extrication when they're done with your training? Are they going to have a better sense of how to be a great leader when they're done with your training? What's your promise to them? And write that down. I'd encourage each of you after this webinar or whenever you get your first chance to write your own value proposition. And you guys will get a copy of these slides after the presentation. We've got a website set up where you can go access those. So if you'd like to see this again, you can, but we've included an example of what a value proposition might look like. So the first step is to say who your business is for firefighters lacking in instruction related to X topic, whatever topic it is that you're going to teach, who maybe haven't gotten a chance to learn about that topic yet. So this is one that's based on some of the things that we do, non-technical marketers, but the reality is you're going to write this very customized for yourself. You want to describe your product, what it is that you're offering to them, and then what you're hoping to deliver. This is what your promise is to your audience. So if you get a chance to write this value proposition, I'd highly recommend it before you move on to any other marketing or promotion. I think one question that we get a lot of the time is, do I have to spend money to make money? And if you use the right tools and you're not trying to do a lot of things like web development and all of this other stuff to host your training and everything else, you really don't have to spend a ton of money to develop your business. So working with a distribution channel that will help you and not hold you back, using social media. Man, you firefighters are incredibly active on Facebook and Twitter. I spend a fair amount of time on social media just learning a little bit more about what your lives are like and what struggles you guys face. Everybody shares a lot of information. It's really pretty easy to get information out via social media. Word of mouth, as we talked about earlier, this is the absolute most effective form of marketing anyways, and it's free. All you have to do is do a great job of being an instructor. You can use email if you have the email addresses. Obviously, paying for contact information is an option, but it's a small world, public safety. I feel like a lot of people know each other, and so having that contact information is absolutely readily available. Offering referral bonuses. So this doesn't cost you money in terms of outlay, but it can reduce your revenue a little bit until you start to see the benefit of volume. But you can offer referral bonuses. And then instructing at conferences. You know, we see it over and over again. People get their start applying to speak at the ISFSI Fall Instructor Conference or at FDIC or Firehouse or whatever other place that you want to start instructing. But this is the very first step in brand recognition, is getting your name on that agenda or that book that's given out when you get to the conference. So apply to teach as many times as you can. Some ways to maximize that word of mouth. So you've put the work in, you've developed amazing content, you're teaching a lot of people. Testimonials are a really quick and easy way to maximize word of mouth. These can be as short as a single quote. So when you have someone who really enjoys your class and they say that to you, ask them if it would be okay if you use that quote in promotional materials. Ask them if they'll write it down for you. Get it as many ways as you can in writing or audio, however you want to do it. But don't be shy about sharing that person's reaction to your course. It's really important. Case studies are a little bit more detailed. They often they kind of enumerate on the challenge or the problem that someone was facing prior to the solution that you provided. And then they kind of describe the solution. And then they come in and they talk about the results. And so you'll want to make sure, if you're going to try to write a case study, that you really understand what the challenges were prior to offering your training, what the training felt like to your students, how they retained the information, and then how they applied it to make a positive change. And then the other way for maximizing word of mouth is social media. Engage with your students on social media, get them to engage back with you. If people see people tweeting about you or making Facebook posts about you straight from themselves, it's not even a testimonial that you posted, it's something that they've just gone ahead and put out there from their account. That's a great way to maximize word of mouth. So all of those things really depend upon the performance of your course. And especially the case study is impossible to do without some sort of performance measurement or metric at the end. So a really kind of good practice here is to find a way to measure the effectiveness of your training, and then describe long-term changes that your training will produce, and work on understanding measurements for the medium-term changes and identifying key performance indicators. So what are the things that you will measure success by? That's a really important factor. Knowing what good looks like after your training allows you to make the kinds of statements that you'll want to make if you're trying to do a case study. So here's a study. This was performed on these results are from an online EVOC course. So we're talking about emergency vehicle operations, in this case for law enforcement, although these exact same courses exist for the fire service as well. And what they were able to do, no one believed that you could do an online training event for EVOC. It just seems unreasonable. We have tracks for a reason, and we all go out and we drive our vehicles and we learn how to do it effectively, and that is important, absolutely. But there are some benefits to be gained by this online training, and this group set out to show that that was absolutely the case. In this particular study, they used a 1,300-member police force, and they trained half of the police course using their online training modules, and then the other half of the police force did not take that training. And you can see from the results here that of the 211 collisions that they experienced in the period measured in this study, 204 of them happened with people who were untrained. The people who received the training, only 7 of those collisions, or 3.3%, occurred in that untrained, or in the trained group. So this is a really effective slide. I think I would have said, no way would I ever expect anyone to take EVOC training online. That's just ineffective. But once I see these study findings, it's pretty hard to argue that that is effective training. And then another statement that I want to make, we talked a little bit about this in terms of using your differentiators to your advantage. Use them early. So don't just use your differentiator within your content. Apply it to the title, the description, and even the imagery that you choose. Make sure things are eye-catching. Don't be afraid to use current important topics and buzzwords. You're not married to your title or description. So if those buzzwords or important topics change in 3 years, guess what? So can your title. So don't be afraid to try different things. See what works and see what people are engaging with. People will judge your course and the quality of your course simply by the title, the description, and the imagery. So make sure that those are absolutely eye-catching. And if you have any sort of results or performance metrics, you can feel free to include those in your description as well. That kind of concludes the marketing or promotion bit of this. I'm going to hand this back to Ari because he's going to talk to you about how to stand out from the crowd.
Thank you, Kim. Fascinating, that study on EVOC. That was 18 months that they correlated those data points.
Yeah.
How to stand out. Nothing is worth doing unless you're willing to be the best in the world at it, right? And that's maybe a bold statement, but I've always told that to young entrepreneurs who come to me and say, Ari, I want to start a business doing this, or I want to run a business doing that. And I say, are you willing to put in the effort to be the best in the world at that one thing? The most successful people in business are the ones that do one thing better than anybody else. And so I challenge those fledgling entrepreneurs with that. and have them think about how to stand out above the rest, because you may think that you have a unique idea or a unique product. I guarantee there's probably 70 to 100 other people who have the same idea and the same product somewhere out there in the universe that are trying to do the same thing. So it's very important that you find a way to build your personal brand, who you are and what makes you and your training unique in the market space. So I'm encouraging you to do a few things. One, do a lot of public speaking. It's amazing, and Kim was talking about this, how if you go out there and you actually speak at these conferences, how the word will get around faster than you can imagine on your being a subject matter expert in this particular domain. And so it's very, very good to make that a practice wherever you can, to go out and talk about the things that you're passionate about. If you're a trainer, the other thing that's absolutely essential is that you do spend some time learning about and or refining your instructional design. I meet a lot of trainers that are passionate and incredibly knowledgeable about a particular subject area, but they haven't studied anything related to adult learning theory and how to package their content in a way that their students are really going to take the maximum benefit from the wisdom that they're trying to share. So if you don't have an instructional design background, be curious about that. Go read some books on instructional design, understand how humans learn, and follow the science there, because it will help your content, it will help your training in many different ways. And finally, never give up a growth mindset. There's always something that we can grow, there's always something that we can learn out there, and the most successful people I find, the most successful business people, or people in general, are ones who are constantly willing to grow and expand their knowledge. From a business perspective, let's talk about focusing on your strengths. So if you're looking at all the aspects that go into a training business, there's obviously the subject matter expertise, the training content, all the things that you're doing day to day in terms of being someone who's a trainer. There's a lot of things out there that are absolutely required to running a successful training business, but that require other kinds of expertise that you may not have, easy access to. So in running a training business, you've got to do everything from, student registration to managing the messaging back and forth, so a lot of clerical tasks. You have to generate diplomas, you got to do payment processing, you got to do records management, and back-end tools that you don't need to actually go out and acquire a registration system, a messaging system. You have to expend time, effort, and money on generating diplomas or building shopping carts for the training. A lot of these tools can be provided to you as part of an infrastructure. The other thing in terms of standing up or above the crowd is to get your training certified. So when we talked about availability early on in one of the slides where you define what it is you want to teach, when you want to stand above the crowd because there's others out there that are doing this, or you want to get the stamp of approval that says this training is head and shoulders in this topic area above anything else that's out there, you go and get FireTCP certified from ISFSI. And they offer this. And what this does is it takes your course and they put it through a rigorous review process. You get two things from this. First of all, you get an objective review of your course materials. And then secondly, if you pass through the gates of this, you will be able to put a stamp on your training that proves that this training is head and shoulders the at the top level. It's the highest possible quality within the fire service, and that gives you another way of standing out from the rest of the competitive pack that's out there. That being said, let's talk about what to do next. So now that you've heard all of this and you're absorbing a lot of things regarding your training, there's sort of 4 things that you should think about. 1, review how your knowledge fills a particular gap out there. So going back to the question of what should I be packaging up, what kind of training? Refine your value proposition, as Kim explained. So ask yourself the hard questions. Go out and look at your course. What are you using as a title, imagery, and description, and clean that up. Probably you have not revisited that in a while. So go and look at that and ask yourself those hard questions, and maybe you'll come up with some really, really good improvements to that. And 4th, choose a distribution platform that allows you to manage your training business, allows you to focus on your strengths and not get bogged down in the minutia of the day-to-day operations of that business. So, in short, because we like to repeat things up to 7 times to make sure that they stick, determine what you want to teach, build a world-class course, consider using a portion of your material as a trailer. That's a wonderful idea that Kim added, and I can just tell you those trailers become a wonderful marketing channel for you. Go out and launch a training program, certify your courses through FireTCP. Don't stop there. Measure the effectiveness of both your marketing and your training. You can't manage what you can't measure. So come up with your metrics. What are they going to be? How many people do I want to touch? How much process improvement do I want to have for a particular fire department? Whatever those metrics are, come up with them and actually measure them, because that becomes a virtuous cycle. You can inject that into your next marketing message and use all of that information to improve your courses as well. We put together a few interesting resources for you to follow. So if you go to this link, you will find a list of resources that might be helpful and sort of additional reading, additional things that you should be thinking about. And the web address is up here on the slide, but if you go to info.firstforward.com/instructor-business, you'll be able to get to this list of references, and they're hyperlinked to the appropriate areas. With that said, we're just out of time, and I'm wondering if we want to take questions for just a few minutes. We can open the line up for anyone who would like to ask Kim or myself questions.
Yes, thank you, Ari. If anybody has any questions for Kim or Ari, I recommend putting them in the chat box, and we'll monitor that for a few minutes. Looks like everybody is just commenting on how great the information is.
We always love fan mail. Thank you for the testimonials. We appreciate that. That being said, if there are questions coming into the box, we can also address them directly later. So we'll take questions for as long as you want to leave it open. And then if you could send us those, we will be happy to respond to the entire group with some answers to those questions, even if they come a bit later.
Sure. All right, it looks like we have one. It says, how do you find if your class is needed?
It's a great question.
It's a fantastic question. Do you want to take that, Kim?
It's incredibly difficult when you're first starting, because it can be time consuming. So start talking to your peers first and foremost. They'll know just as well as you will. If you're hearing from a lot of people that they don't have good training in a certain topic area, it's needed. Check multiple regions. Just because something isn't available in your region doesn't mean that it's not available in general. But it might be taught by one subject matter expert in a region of the country and he's unwilling to travel. In that case, the rest of the country or even the world is open to you. So just consider what you might do if you do find out that something is available, but maybe it's only a regional opportunity for people. Do some internet searching, check on, I would go on to First Forward. We're getting a ton of courses up there on the site, so make sure that there's not something on there that is exactly what you want to be teaching. And then even if you find a course on the topic that you want to teach, it does not mean that you don't have a differentiator that could make yours more effective. So take the course if you can. Take the course and see if you are offering something different than what they're offering, because there could be a huge gap in information, and that means that there's still a need for you to fill. So again, start with your peers, check for regionally specific classes and information that's available, and do a lot of web searching. And then if you can actually get a hold of the classes and take them, see if you're different. Or do you want to add?
I would add that the market needs analysis, which is really what you're doing here, is absolutely vital before you spend a lot of time, energy, and money developing a course. Do it, be disciplined and do this research. And whether it is online searches, again, or asking your peers, make sure that there's a need, because a lot of entrepreneurs build a product and they forget this step, and then they wonder why their business doesn't take off. So make sure you do you're disciplined and go through this market needs analysis phase.
Kim or Ari, do you guys know of a master list of workshops and conferences available other than the big ones like FDIC, Firehouse, perhaps state fire associations, etc.?
I don't know of a master list anywhere, aside from the one that we keep to figure out how many places we can get in a year. But yeah, I'm not sure of a master list of conferences. I can ask our marketing team to see if they have found one in their searches and send that to you if I can find it.
Or we can also add it to this landing page.
Yep.
Perfect. I know we're going to work on trying to put together a directory for conferences based on the call for presentations, so that could potentially be what you're looking for, Joe.
Yeah, and I think that there are some opportunities that, like, for instance, I didn't think about. So this week I'll be talking at the Indiana Volunteer Firefighters Association meeting. So volunteer meetings, I think of like the fire chiefs meeting and that sort of thing for each state or region, but I don't always think about, like, are the volunteers getting together somewhere, and is there information that I can get to them that's really critical? You know, one thing that we think about a lot with volunteers is that they don't have the resources necessarily to get some of the training that they need, and they don't have the time to come into the department and do some live training, and so that on-demand training becomes really important for them. So is there a way to get in front of them and start building your business so that they're aware that you're willing to work with volunteer departments, maybe offer a different pricing or something like that that makes it a little bit more, like, digestible for volunteers? So that's like one place that we've started talking about going, and we hadn't really thought about that much before, but they do, they get together just as much as any other group. So consider the groups that seem a little bit smaller and a little bit less like publicly enormous, because you can much more easily get in as a presenter, I think, with some of those and get started.
That's a good tip. Thanks, Kim.
Sure thing.
Another question is, do you think a bio page is needed in a PowerPoint?
Not necessarily in the PowerPoint. This is Ari. This is my opinion. I don't think it's necessarily required in the PowerPoint. However, your bio is your brand. And so it does reflect your brand and sort of what you're bringing. And so having that available somewhere, it might be on, your web page. It might be something that you hand out in addition to the PowerPoint about you. remember, a lot of this as an individual trainer is building your personal brand. So you're going to think just as hard about your bio page and what it is, what's the wisdom that you're bringing, why should a fire department believe that you have the expertise to deliver this particular course. So it's important to constantly build up that bio page and encapsulate what's the essence of you. What is it that makes you the person that they want to hire for this training?
So my tip for a bio page is to print it and hand it out at a presentation, but print it on the back or front, doesn't matter if you consider it the back or front, of practical, applicable information. Because for me, the hope is always that someone will take that page home and leave it on their desk or share it with a colleague. And if they share it with a colleague, then your bio is plastered on the back of it so that they can see the value that you bring as an instructor. But you want to create as much I want to hand this to my friend as humanly possible. So I always try to put bio information in conjunction with actual educational information.
Good thoughts. Doesn't look like we have any other questions unless anybody else has anything. Just more positive feedback for you guys.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks everyone. It's been an honor and a pleasure to spend time with you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.